She doesn't want to give up.
So she wants everything for nothing. She doesn't want to do anything. That's good. As long as she can't come back and swear. She gives up.
Hail, hail the gang.
Somebody told me last night.
It's really a pretty simple question.
Good evening. Thank you for all coming. Why don't we stand up and say pledge allegiance? Mr. Magadone?
I pledge allegiance
To the flag
to the United States of America,
to the republic
for which it stands, one nation,
under God,
indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Beautiful thing.
Madam Secretary, is this regular meeting of the Cerebral Planning Board being conducted in accordance with the Open Meeting Act?
Yes, it has.
Thank you very much. We have a roll call.
Mr. Bello.
Here.
Mr. Hudkevich.
Here.
Mr. Davis.
Here.
Mr. Kelly.
Here.
Mr. Lembo.
Here.
Mr. McEnone.
am present.
Mr. Ty.
Here.
Mr. Rogoff.
Here.
Mr. Cornell.
Here.
Mr. Leon
Here.
And absent, everybody that's absent called in, right?
They all called in, they're excused.
Okay. I need the acceptance of the minutes of June 1st, 2017.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion, we accept those minutes.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing no questions, I'll have the minutes accepted. And passed. Communication agenda. No communications. Site plans, subdivisions, none, right? We're going to speak about Hercules LLC. John, I guess you got the floor.
Well, the first thing I'd like to do is swear Mr. Leon Cavello in, since he's providing testimony with respect to the study he prepared. And I
Okay?
understand that's what the planning board's procedure has been in the past.
Yes.
If
Yes.
not, we should
Okay.
swear him in anyway.
Good.
Sir, would you please stand and raise your right hand? You swear the testimony you're about to give before the board is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
All right, now that you're duly sworn, start speaking.
Well, before he does that, for the
Uh-oh.
record, let's mark the preliminary investigation for determination of an area in need of redevelopment as A1. This is Mr. Leon Cavallo's formal study, investigation, and report. And I would make that a part of the record, move it into evidence, and let Mr. Leon Cavallo give us a synopsis of the contents therein.
Okay, board members, you were given this, the draft report here dated May 31st, 2017, and it is the traditional preliminary investigation for determination of an area in need of redevelopment per the local redevelopment and housing law in the state of New Jersey. This property, as you know, is the Hercules property, which has been property that's been in the borough since I believe the late 1800s. What I did with this is what I typically do is do the introduction, what the redevelopment process is, an overview, and because of the history of of this company merged with the borough through such a long period of time, I also did a synopsis or a quick company history. There's a couple of books written about this through the Historic Committee and Museum, who were nice enough to lend me some of their file, and one of these books that were written by two members of the Hercules Corporation. So I did a small company history, then we talked about the study area and basis for the investigation. Then there were a number of maps, which we'll go over quickly, and pictures that were taken at certain times. The first set of pictures, which are black and white, are coordinated with a GPS system and associated with a map. And the second set of pictures, which are in color, are just pictures taken throughout the site showing the foundations of much of the buildings that have been taken down and leveled, and the rubble associated with those buildings, to go to and talk about the criteria. The next thing we talked about was the existing condition and the land use of the property. There has been remediation activity at the site for the past 20, 25 years. Then I talk about the statutory criteria, the applicability of the statutory criteria in terms of what we have to do as a board to satisfy the requirements of the council, and then the conclusions of the study. Then in the appendix, there are a couple of maps which we'll go over, a couple of historic maps from the 1960s, the 1930s, and the I believe it is 1983 is the last map. So just quickly, I'll go over the highlights here. Starting with number 3, the overview and company history. There were a number of things that we've done in the past. There is a New Jersey State Development and Redevelopment Plan, which we talk about in here because most of the borough is in the Metropolitan Planning Area number 1, which is important, and we talk about that in terms of what has been done in the study for remediation of certain processes and that the Hercules company had ongoing since the late 1800s. There has been a preliminary assessment done, which is called a site investigation study. There's been a remedial investigation study, which is called an RI, and there's been for areas of concern within the study area, and those are AOCs in accordance with the requirements that were done by an environmental group and presented to the state New Jersey DEP. The company history, as you can imagine, is a long one. It was very interesting. There is, as you look at what the company was and is now, it's has evolved over, you know, the last 40 or 50 or 60 years. There were 4 main divisions at first in the Hercules company. They were the Aquilon company, which provided products that were used to change the physical property of water-based water-based systems, and that's what, you know, they've been doing for the last 25 years, I guess. There was another division called Fiber Visions, which was a leading industry company that produced thermal bond, propylinear, stable fiber, and various other textile fibers, which was, as I understand it, very innovative at the time. There's another Hercules division called Pinovar, which was one that made only pale wood rosin derivatives, and they were the only producer of these derivatives, this chemical, in the world at one time. And there were challenges, I assume, or I read, in the late 1990s and early 2000s, which almost forced Hercules to restructure and sell off various assets. They postponed and delayed that process, but the fight continued until the International Specialty Products started in 2003. The early history of Hercules was there several explosive companies that were acquired by DuPont back in the 1880s. By the beginning of the 20th century, DuPont had absorbed so many competitors that they produced 2/3 of the dynamite and gunpowder sold in the United States. In 1912, there was a court order citing that the Sherman antitrust order was broken up, and it was through that court order that Hercules was reborn into a manufacturing of explosives ostensibly separate from DuPont. The company began an explosive company serving the mining industry, gun owners, and the military. In the first month of its operation, Hercules had plants up and down the East Coast, and they also preferred to have smaller plants rather than larger ones, because in operating and transporting such material, it was easier to have your customers close rather than have your sources of raw material close, because of the dangers of explosions. By 1935, they had 5 divisions. One was explosives, another was naval stores, nitrocellulose was another division, chemical cotton was another division, and paper products were another division. Interlaced with this, which I found interesting from a historic point of view, was that you had the Raritan River Railroad that ran across Middlesex County. It was founded in 1888, based in South Amboy, and it ran west to New Brunswick. These two companies, Hercules and the Raritan River Railroad, were actually intertwined through all the years that they exist, and the railroad still exists today. And Hercules is one of the few customers for the line that still exists, as moderate as it is. It's not anything that's extensive at this particular point, but the point is it's still in place. So early in the process, I believe in 1888, the railroad had 2 engines and 20-ton gondola cars that they used for customers all up and down the line, which went through Sayreville. So all the mining that was done for clay and brick went to these onto the Raritan River Railroad. By 1998, there were 3 engines. They had 34 freight cars. They had passenger service. They had 12 miles of main line and 2 branch lines, and they serviced many of the mining operations that were in Sayreville in those early years. By 1917, the railroad was very busy, and they were supplying the Gillespie Powder Company works and DuPont and Hercules, all making munitions for World War I. By the 1940s, they were making munitions for World War II. In the 1950s, there was a temporary boost in tonnage with the railroad because there was construction of the New Jersey Turnpike, which generated significant fill materials and sand movements. The major shippers by this time were National Lead, DuPont, Hercules, and Johnson & Johnson. Again, through the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the railroad kept operating with the old-time customers. Hercules was an important customer that produced about 16% of the revenue for the railroad. So as the railroad grew, Hercules grew, and it kept on going on until the Hercules is still connected to the main line. It's been resurrected, possibly through the redevelopment plan, because it can be upgraded. Conrail was the purchaser of the railroad, is now the system that handles it for the Northeast Corridor. And so there's a possibility of increasing and utilizing this in the redevelopment plan for the future, where we just wouldn't have truck traffic there. We would have a railroad connection, which every property, there aren't that many properties in New Jersey and on the East Coast that have that asset. So we have in accordance with our tax assessor, which you'll find on page 9, a list of the block and lots that are associated with the Hercules property. We also have a list from the tax assessor, which on Appendix A, which is something he put together, which I put in there just as, which shows that we have approximately 590 acres of land that are associated with the block and lots of the tract. Other places I've seen 543 acres as the size of the property. So I think we have to use the one that is associated with the description on page 9 for the purposes of notice and for the purposes of this redevelopment study.
Page 9 also consists of your statement of purpose of the study.
Yes, it does. And that is that,
In the third paragraph, beginning with these properties of the study.
yes, these properties of the study were reviewed by the borough, given the manifestation of physical deterioration and less than fully productive utilization of land in aggregate conditions considered to be detrimental to the welfare of the Sayreville Borough. Additionally, the borough recognizes that these conditions have existed for some time and that absence of proactive borough intervention in the form of redevelopment planning is required, and said conditions are not likely to change unless new initiatives and private sector capital are introduced.
Now, Mr. Leoncavella, before you give us your professional planning opinion, need to, just for the record, put your qualifications on the record. Your background, education, and training.
Okay.
Obviously, in your current position with the borough.
I've held the current position with the borough as a planning board consultant for the planning board since 2003. I have over 30 years of experience in community planning. I've testified before private planning boards and zoning boards in the order of about 250
Yeah.
through the years, and Superior Court.
And your education?
Jersey. I'm a licensed planner in the state of New Jersey, have a Bachelor of Science in Community Planning and Landscape Architecture.
All right, I make a recommendation that we accept his credentials as mentioned.
Second it.
Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Glad to see that you're up to snuff.
Thank you. The next page talks about the study maps. The page that follows, page 10, is an area map that shows an aerial photography of the property that encloses the 540 to 590 acres. And these pictures were taken on March 10th. They were done with an Apple GPS camera, so we could associate the locations. Those locations are slightly blown up on the next page and are associated with figures or photos 1 through 27, which were taken on that date of August 10th,
March 10 of what year?
March 10th of 2017.
Yep.
The next pictures, and there are a number of pictures, for instance, the first black and white picture that goes along with that list on the previous page shows the positioning of that location and indicates, if some of you remember having been on the site, there are 3 very large parking areas on the site that were utilized for 3 different shifts in Hercules. And this is showing the remnants of what is there now. Those parking lots are still there with many cracks, vegetation coming out of the cracks, part of the obsolescence that has occurred on the property in the past 20 to 30 years. The next set of pictures, which go on through the black and whites, are a series of pictures that just show color pictures of all the rubble that has been demolished on-site with all the old buildings. Many buildings were on the northern part of the property. I'll go over the map in a couple of seconds. But the ultimate utilization of all this is that it's so far beyond help, and in accordance with the criteria, it's unattainable to recover from this demolition and this destruction. So the property is not utilized, or could not be utilized for leasing or for sale in this condition. And therefore, we require, or we have to use the criteria under the redevelopment law, which I'll talk about in a minute, that goes through the several criterion that we use to develop this redevelopment study. The last part of the component I want to talk about before that is the existing conditions and land uses on the property. And this, if you look at the last page in your the report, Exhibit A is the property layout and environmental impacts. The property, let me just say, is divided into a number of areas, first of all, and then I'll talk about what the environmental conditions are. The existing property, which is Ashland Specialty Ingredients, ASI, is the yellow area that's kind of in the middle of the tract, which is designated in yellow. And underneath it is this current plant area. There's a number of associated environmental impacts regarding these areas. The area to the south was another manufacturing line called the former B line. That's been all demoed. The area to the north, which is the original NC, which stands for nitro cellulose area, was the original construction area in the before 1940 for the nitrocellulose manufacturing. The blue areas are landfills and fill areas that have been established in consideration of some of the previous reclamation and remediation that's been done on site in the past 30 to 40 years. There's been some deterioration of the groundwater, but that has, according to the environmental studies, not really had a major effect on the groundwater and has attenuated over the years. There are iron oxide precipitate lagoons, which are in brown, which are throughout the site, and there are some wetlands and some areas to the north which are actually very interesting wooded areas that have grown and are very nice on the piece of the property, as opposed to the demolition and the rubble and the old railroad sites, which are still active, I'm told. They're connected through the existing railroad system. So we have those areas, and through those areas, there's a number of, in the reclamation investigation report, there's isolated PCBs in certain superficial soils. There's placement of spent lime in certain acidic wastewater areas of various lagoons. We have small-scale releases of fuel oil and other hydrocarbon properties, which are listed on page 11. The historic releases associated with nitric and sulfuric acid and neutralization activities resulting in groundwater with low pH and elevated concentrations of nitrate and sulfate are located as per the map. We have the former B line, as I discussed, showing that on the southern and southwest portions of the tract. Approximately 136 acres were taken up for large warehousing in the southwest portion for the B line, which has now all been demolished. And the current manufacturing area, again, which is Ashland Specialty Ingredients, is a thickener that they make that is used for various industrial and consumer products and has been made since 1975. There are some small environmental problems there, which include PCB and DDT occurrences, 4 closed landfill cells, and TBA and CT impacted water underneath the current plant areas and areas of the south controlled via active remediation systems since 1996 and have been reported to the New Jersey DEP. The 7th section is the statutory criteria under the redevelopment law, which talks about the 8 criteria, of which I assess that there are 3 criteria that create the need for this property to be determined to be in need of redevelopment. The first criteria, which I talk about on page 15, is criteria B analysis, which is the discontinuance of the use of buildings previously used for commercial, manufacturing, or industrial purposes, the abandonment of such buildings or the same being allowed to fall into so great state of disrepair that to be untenable. The photos in these in the report shows how total discontinuation of the uses on the site and the inability to sell or lease the portions of the tract are due to the abandonment of the structures and to the continuation of just the structures in terms of its foundations, and in most cases, just to the rubble that exists. So all that has to be cleaned up, obviously, before we can go through a redevelopment plan.
In your opinion, Mr. Leoncavallo, this property meets criteria B of 40A:12A-5, is that correct?
That is correct.
And it's your opinion, it's your professional planning opinion, that qualifies this property to be an area in need of redevelopment, is that correct?
That is correct.
All right, go ahead.
Criteria E is the analysis of the total lack of proper utilization of areas caused by conditions that result in a stagnant and not fully productive condition of potentially useful land contributing to and serving the public health, safety, and welfare. This tract exhibits potentials for new land uses and purposes to serve the changing community and the region. The designation will facilitate a variety of appropriate new innovative uses in the Cheesequake Road corridor in the light industrial redevelopment area. I think we will have new opportunities for investment on this property. The redevelopment plan will be finished, I believe, I've been told, by the end of the year. And the character of the significant impact of the vitality of the borough, the corridor, and the region will potentially be created with new land uses and business ventures to create new job creation as well as tax base expansion. So this is an additional E criteria under the local housing law that also helps meet the redevelopment requirements. Criteria H analysis defines smart growth. Smart growth supports livable neighborhoods with a variety of land uses, prices that range from industry through housing, will provide multimodal forms of transportation. The requirements of the Office of Smart Growth epitomize the compact rail accessibility for light industrial uses, mixed use development, and other land uses would be appropriate under the smart growth policies of the state. And as of March 2001, the New Jersey Development and Redevelopment Plan provided a comprehensive plan framework for the future of the state, which includes applications of the smart growth principles. We have concurred with those principles as a borough and within our planning documents, especially our master plan, which talks about policy objectives under land use plan element, which was promoting redevelopment and development and to ensure efficient and beneficial utilization of scarce land resources, which we are trying to accomplish with the redevelopment of this property. Economic development, that promote economic development by encouraging redevelopment efforts such as infill and land assembly, private and public partnerships, and infrastructure improvements. And finally, redevelopment, encouraging redevelopment at intensities sufficient to support transit, a broad range of uses and efficient use of infrastructure, promoting design that enhances public safety, encourages pedestrian activity, and reduces dependency on vehicles, truck vehicles and automobiles. The benefits of the borough will include, in regard to this redevelopment project, is negotiations of a pilot program between a developer and Sayreville Borough, and we will also have the creation of numerous union construction jobs that will act as permanent supportive operation positions in the community for the life of the proposed facility, which will be addressed under the redevelopment plan. The conclusion of the study is that under the criteria of B, E, and H, which I discussed just moments ago, it is recommended that the Borough of Sayreville governing body and planning board take the action necessary after public notice and hearing to make a formal designation, thereby creating the designation for the Sayreville Hercules Corporation to include all parcels listed in this report and under Appendix A as an area in need of redevelopment according to the local planning and redevelopment law. The appendices show the tracks that we talked about before by block and lot. Appendix B shows the aerial map of the area that's required under the municipal law of the Redevelopment Act. C shows historic aerials, 1931, which is a little hard to read, but you can see where the roadway systems are, the railroad going through the area, because actually the railroad was well over 30 years old at that time. 1967 shows the area which basically follows the same alignment of roads and railroad. And 1983, which is in color, shows other improvements, but again, based on the form that was first started probably back in the early 1910s. The exhibit map, which we've talked about, is the last color rendered map in the appendix. And again, it shows the locations of the original nitrocellulose area, which was to the north, the existing current plant area, which is the yellow area, which is encompassing some of the fills and the lagoons, which are in blue, and to the south, which is the forested area of the former B line, which is now has been demolished as well, and is reflected in the photos that I showed you before. So if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer those. But I think the study shows if this isn't one property that needs to be redeveloped, there aren't too many properties that are in need of redevelopment. This is a classic example of redevelopment and the need for it to go ahead and to make this a productive use in the next, hopefully, 10 or 15 years within the borough.
John, you did an extensive job on this, and and kudos to you. It's well laid out. How long did something like this take?
It took longer than I thought it would take, and not making excuses, but part of the reasoning was that we had issues with affordable housing that had to be addressed, and they had to be addressed on an immediate basis, and this had to be put slightly on the back burner, but it took myself and another associate a good deal of time to finish this in the last 5 months.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions to the planner?
Good.
Sorry, go.
John, on page 8, you talk about the Raritan River Railroad, which is interesting.
Page, give me the page.
Page 8.
Page 8.
And he spent a lot of time on the railroad and the properties, I guess, that the railroad used. But where do they go? Because all the Raritan River Railroad properties in South Amboy are gone, they're built on, they're developed. So if we have this railroad system in Saraville, where does it go and how is it gonna benefit us?
Well, it's one of the few, the properties that are included are, as it said on page 8, once I didn't mention before, in 1979, the revenue from that year was generated was nearly $2 million, which was a significant amount of money. National Lead, which is gone, was 30% of their revenues, and Hercules was 16%. There, when we took a field visit with one of the employees from the company, who showed us, and we couldn't do this on our own. We had to go, you had to register at the
No, John, but
guardhouse.
my question is, the last paragraph there, Hercules Incorporated is still connected to the main line. That's fine, but where is that main line at? Because there are railroad tracks that go through there.
It goes somewhere
wait.
from.
The
it goes-
resurrection of Hercules track for redevelopment purposes could potentially result in the Conrail system rejuvenating the old Raritan River Railroad lines to full operation again. How can you do that if most of it is all gone already?
It's not gone. We were told by a number of people that the system still exists. Hercules actually did get at one point, up to a certain number of years ago, they got, maybe one train, one carload of material of some kind. It goes from, I believe, it's from New Brunswick west to South Amboy, or east to South Amboy.
But everything in South Amboy is gone.
Yeah, but it's tied into the Conrail lines, like right on Bordentown Avenue. You can come out of Hercules property, go across and get in, and once you're in that yard, you can go anywhere in the country.
And if Conrail acquires this here, are they gonna use that for,
They did acquire it.
so are we gonna use that for commuter?
And that's why it's been there's been some updating, I guess, through the years, so that's why in a certain situation, you can update these lines if there's a need to, and in
But you
regard
say
to.
to fully operational again, but fully operational as, how will it be used? Commuter or?
Well, I don't think it
industrial?
would be used as commuter, it would be freight line.
Well, they talked about that years ago, having commuter lines go through, down along Bordentown Avenue.
Because the new
Same
redevelopment,
line.
the new redevelopment plan would be for a major number of warehouses, other uses that would create need for railroad transportation, freight lines.
But would we have any say over how that line is to be used?
Well, I don't.
I don't think so.
I think we're getting ahead of ourselves, and I don't know the
Well, I
answer.
mean, if it's a benefit to have the railroad through there, you certainly want to use it as a commercial use and not.
Conrail has they have the line right now, as Mr. Ty said.
They're delivering to Red Oaks, which is in the back of that property. They're also delivering to Florida Power and Light. They don't
Yeah,
get a
you
lot of,
see-
they don't get a lot of trains, but they do get trains. And that's off of that line that goes down Journey Mill Road. And it goes all the way through Journey Mill Road into South River.
I know where this is.
Okay. That's the one that they talked about doing the Monmouth,
Right.
the
And that's what
Monmouth
I'm
line
referring
into
to.
Jamesburg.
Right.
And those lines are all still there,
I know they are.
whether they're gonna ever do anything with them.
And then on the last map that you have there, Appendix D, where you have it all colored in, what is the percentage of the property that's been remediated already? You indicate what is the slurries, transformer with PCBs, fuel oil, iron oxide.
Well, according to
solvents,
this,
low pH acid. So
most of it has been remediated.
how much? 80, 50, 60, 45?
They didn't give an indication, but I'm thinking it's more like at least 75% of it has been
It must be
remediated.
remediated anyway, right? Now,
We're not gonna do it. I know we're
No,
not
I
doing-
mean, whoever buys this and does it has to remediate everything.
I-
There's certain
exactly
hot
like-
spots that are in that, that
Exactly
are
like
hotter
we did
than
with the
other.
point, I understand
The
that,
same thing we talked about the last time they came in here.
right.
John, it's currently still owned by Hercules.
Excuse me?
The property's currently still owned by Hercules,
Yes.
and a developer has to purchase it. Walk us through the process of it being redeveloped. How's it gonna work?
Well, if we do our resolution and go to the council will then pass their resolution that will make this an area in need of redevelopment. And then the next component is to do a redevelopment study that shows
Plan.
a plan.
They come up with the redevelopment plan.
Who's they?
Council.
Council.
So then we,
Once the plan has been determined, plan could come back to us, and we would look at the plan and have comment about it,
Send it back to them for final.
and then we're done. It becomes an area in need of redevelopment. We just make the recommendation. We do the study, we make the recommendation, but the council ultimately determines
Right, but
whether they.
But the owner would have
they
to
can
sell the property.
They can disagree.
the owner has to release the property or sell the property.
Got nothing to do with who owns it or what. We're making a process, do we think that this has to be redeveloped? And if that's, then we're gonna deem it a redevelopment zone, right? They'll give us a plan, we'll look at it, we'll send it back, then Sarah takes it. Then the developer and the owner get involved. When they get done and they come up with a final plan, they come back to us. Is that correct?
Yeah, ultimately it has to come back to you, because once the plan for the area has been determined, someone has to provide a redevelopment plan for the area. It'll come back to you, whether it's a warehouse, whether it's this or it's that, or,
So what you're afraid of
Like any other
is we're not gonna get to say,
Will I still be alive, I guess is what I'm.
well, it's better than that, they're not gonna holler at you for picking and making it all warehouses so no kids come in, you know?
Well, speaking of that, on page 17, the author of this fine report made a comment that one of the benefits to the borough is that negotiation of a pilot program between the developer and Sayville Borough. So, you know, I struggle with this philosophically, so explain to me how that's a benefit.
explain to you how.
How entering a pilot program is beneficial to the borough. Because I've been down that road a couple of times, I still haven't grasped onto that concept.
Well,
And you made a point to make that statement, so I need to understand it.
I can help out a little here.
I'm asking the author of the report. On page 17.
okay. Well, normally, one of the benefits of this redevelopment law is to create a pilot program whereby you set up payments with the developer through an
Excuse me,
agreement.
John, I know what a
Yeah.
pilot program is. I'm asking you, how is that a benefit to the borough? Because that's what you put it under. You said benefit to the borough, and the number one thing you said is
It's
a
a
pilot
benefit
program. How's that a benefit?
as, it's a benefit in terms of there's a payment done from the redeveloper to the borough.
It's a better benefit than taxes?
It's an alternate benefit to taxes.
But I don't know what an alternate benefit is. You understand where I'm coming from?
I understand what you're saying,
Okay.
but it's a pilot program is a financial contribution.
It benefits the developer.
Little tax, that's nothing to do, really. I mean, it's.
It benefits the developer. Doesn't benefit the borough.
Well, it attracts developers to come in and spend money in our town.
I understand. But we can, certainly, we've been developing things for years without a pilot program. That's been a new concept. Because maybe
But,
they're smart
but in
enough.
this case, I think it's more necessary than, you know, to do this, the extent of this obsolescence and the nature of what needs to be done here is so significant that it can't, and it hasn't been done in the past 50
So you're
years.
suggesting it's an incentive to the developer to come in and
It's
develop?
an incentive to the developer, and the borough gets something in lieu of taxes.
You also go on to say creation of numerous union construction jobs is a benefit to the borough. Yeah, if those people live in the borough, it's a benefit to the borough.
Yeah, and also there's gonna be operational positions that'll be available from these warehouses and other uses that are within the track area as to the redevelopment plan. So,
So
those
in the
people will
redevelopment
have to-
plan, it will be determined how that will be zoned and what will go there?
Yes. There'll be, I haven't seen anything yet, but I understand there is plans for extensive warehousing, maybe an additional power.
How do you get to it?
How do you get
If
to
you're
it?
gonna put warehouses there?
You're gonna get to it off of
The railroad.
Cheesequake Road. You're gonna get into it. It's gonna be, it's 500 acres of property. It has to be
We get a plan.
you know,
Michael,
There are ways to get it
that'll
now.
happen when we get a plan, and part of
I
that.
understand, but
part of that
the
plan is-
roadway infrastructure of Journey Mill Road and Bordentown Avenue is not suitable for
Well,
tractor
on
trailer.
one of the, on our master plan, there's a cut-through road that,
Master plan also has a bypass road.
yeah, well, and that's it. The bypass road is gonna be part and parcel of this new plan. Even in the redevelopment plan.
Call me skeptical. but I-
Yeah, but Tom, every time we talk about it, and I bring it up a lot, about the bypass road, it's never gonna go through because it's always being proposed in sections. And unless we bring that bypass road through in one
Well,
swoop,
we're not talking about the
never gonna
we're
happen.
not talking about the bypass road, the Main Street one.
well, what bypass road are we talking about?
We're talking about the one that goes
Washington
between
Road to Cheesequake.
between Cheesequake and
Washington.
Journey Mill Road. There's a bypass road on the master plan that does that. And this, we don't have to piecemeal it, because it's the one piece of property, Alan. Now, will that alleviate all the traffic? No, but I mean, you have a piece of property that has trains, and you also have a piece of property that's pretty much accessible to Route 18, through the back way of Cerebral. I don't know, so,
I don't know, I don't see it.
Kenny, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, if I may, John, you're recommending, just for the record, you're recommending that this go to the council
Yes.
for their consideration. And Jay, I'd like to get your opinion on this for the engineering perspective.
Well, at this point, it's really a planning issue. It meets the criteria to say it would qualify as an area in need of redevelopment, so that's really what the board is going to take action on at this point in time. Eventually, when you look at the redevelopment plan, things we talked about, the bypass road, that would go through and call for a realignment of Cheesequake Road, have part of that road constructed on this property and connect into Hartle Street, which is something that this board has required be constructed. So you would have a bypass road in the future as part of that redevelopment plan, but that's the next phase in the process.
All right, thank you. Also, John, I'd like to thank you for a excellent presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Gillen.
Anybody else have any other questions about the need for this redevelopment?
Borough Council planner has to
Need a
do
resolution?
too.
I'm not
No,
questioning
we
the
need to
need.
open this up to public.
Okay.
Huh?
I'm not questioning the need, just the process, that's all.
Just the process, okay. Well, hang on, we're gonna go through the process. This is the first step.
Wonderful.
If there's no more questions, I need a motion
Make
to
a motion to open the
public.
public.
Get a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Anybody from the public like to speak?
Counsel, you want to come up, just identify who you are? I know you're here and you represent Hercules.
Sure. Just for the record, my name is Jennifer Phillips Smith. I'm an attorney with Gibbons PC. And I do represent Hercules LLC, which is the owner of the property that you're considering this evening.
Ma'am, Pat, you have the microphone?
a microphone?
Not picking that up.
No, it won't pick up on the tape.
You can't understand it anyway, I don't think.
Yeah, I know.
We should have that problem.
No, no.
Better repeat that.
You can't hear anything.
Sure. So for the record, my name is Jennifer Phillips Smith. I'm an attorney with Gibbons PC, and I do represent Hercules LLC, which is the owner of the property that you're considering this evening. Hercules is in support of this process and of the council ultimately hopefully designating the property as a non-condemnation area in need of redevelopment. As we indicated to Sarah several months ago, there is a portion of the site that's still in active operation, but it's a relatively small portion compared to what used to be decades ago. And it's an opportunity to open up 400 plus acres to new investment in the municipality. And we've come to the conclusion that there's no one user that's going to come along and purchase the 400 plus acres. So the best way to proceed from our point of view is through a collaborative, cooperative process with the borough to try to move forward and identify what types of uses should be there and how to go through the redevelopment process to draw new investment into the town. And as I know you were concerned that this is a process, this is really step one. And there will be many steps to come and many future public meetings where we discuss the redevelopment plan, redevelopment agreements, and everything that comes with it in the end. And there will be opportunities to discuss infrastructure programs and everything that comes with redevelopment. But we do ask that you proceed with step one so that we can at least move the process along and hopefully use it as a way to attract investment into the borough for non-residential uses.
Okay, thank you. I know you have people here from Hercules if there was any questions, but unless anybody has any specific questions, which didn't look like they do, and I don't see anybody else in the public. You have any other comment, Counselor?
We don't. We do have with us our redevelopment consultant, Glenn Stock. We have John Metz and David Bamford, who is our plant manager. They are here for questions, but you did a wonderful job, Mr. Leoncavallo, of going through the history of the site.
But your intent and your plan is to redevelop this property as non-residential?
Our intent is to attract non-residential developers
Yeah, well.
to the property. Correct, non-residential.
It seems every time we say non-residential, we interpret that to be warehouses.
It doesn't have to be, it could be anything.
How many acres you need for a golf course? That looks like nice right there. We never think about that. We think about warehouses. I just,
Well, that's the plan process.
maybe I've been on the board too long.
Maybe.
We love warehouses.
You know, the one thing that,
We close the public portion.
we'll close the public portion, we can close the public portion.
Make a motion to close public, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
That's it. All right. So we have this draft in front of us. What would you like to do with it?
Mr. Chairman, make a motion, we get a resolution to the mayor and council in reference to this area in need of redevelopment for their review.
To declare it an area in need of redevelopment, that's your
Right.
recommendation.
Yes.
Right. Do I have a second on that?
Second.
Do I have any questions on that? We're going to make this preliminary investigation, a redevelopment area for, a need for a redevelopment, and send it to the council.
Yes.
Any questions on that? If not, we'll take a roll call vote.
Mr. Bello,
Yes.
Mr. Hudkevich,
Yes. Question. I have a question. Is the council gonna use their professional planner to review this also, or is this entirely up to us?
Well, unfortunately, the matter's closed and you're in the vote tally.
Yeah, you can't bring that up now.
You can make comment when he,
Well, it's
before
my
he votes.
comments, that's all.
You could, yep, you could make a comment, certainly, not a question.
Comment.
Comment well noted.
Thank
Mr. Davis,
you. Yes.
Mr. Kelly.
Yes.
Mr. Limbo.
Yes.
Mr. McEnon.
Yes, I believe it's an area in need of redevelopment.
Mr. Ty.
Yes, and thank you for choosing Ceraville.
7.
So the resolution's adopted, and I'll prepare it and present it at the August 2nd meeting, at which time I'm really on vacation, but I would come here just for that.
You're a wonderful man.
Thank you,
Making
Counselor.
one for the team. Under new business, we have the, and how do you pronounce that, Jay? Orgessa. That was the piece of property that was over there where they wanted to do out of the apple orchard. They want us to continue this. Miller and Marsh Avenue, and they want us to continue this. It's under ours that we should make them renotice by the time they come back. Anybody have a problem with doing that?
No.
Need a motion to,
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
can I get a second?
Second.
Any questions? So it's been postponed so many times, we have to make them renotice. We should. So, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The ayes have it.
So it's carried to the August 2 meeting, or August,
Well, it
because the
doesn't,
letter says August 16. So what are we carrying it to?
we're not carrying it at all. We're gonna make them renotice it.
Well, yeah, but that, as my understanding is that.
He carried it
we're-
twice.
That's, yeah, at least twice, since May 17th, actually.
Okay.
But Jay suggested that, since this is not a major developer type person, that we we carry it without making them refile it and just make them renotice the new date. Is that right, Jay?
I think we had talked about not a date certain. So
not a
he was
date certain?
asking,
Okay.
yeah, so we would just not make them file a new application.
that's right,
Not
correct.
carry it to a
But
specific
they have
date.
to renotice.
That's right, because we don't have a date certain, and presumably people would be here, and we'd be able to tell them, here's the new date. We can't do that because
We don't know the new
we
date.
don't know the new date, so he has to renotice. That's
Once he
correct.
decides, if he's gonna come back to the planning board, we'll give him a new date, he'll renotice. If he goes to the zoning board, you transfer it to the zoning board, and that's the end.
Yep.
Okay? The procedure is fine? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Old business, new business, administrative business?
Mr. Chairman, I just have a comment. In light of the ongoing issues with the board and the council and whatever, I think that I've known you for a number of years, and you've served for many years on the board, and I just wanted to let you know, and I believe that the board feels the same way, that we're fully behind you in this matter, and we'd like to see you continue on in your current duties.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your support. Anybody else?
I'd like to second that, Tom. You know my opinion about what's been going on. The last two council meetings, we've been thrown under the bus. We really haven't had anybody support us other than our council representative. I'm disappointed in our professionals that we really didn't get better representation or support, and I feel like we were thrown under the bus. Everything that they said in the paper here about the residents not wanting to increase the density of the population, taxes, traffic, school district, we have no control over that, but yet we're being blamed for it.
Wait till we get blamed for requesting that this area be redeveloped. Wait till that happens.
Well,
And if the council really believes that mega warehouses is a better option over housing, then let their planner be the one to recommend that.
well, politics being politics, that's it. I think this board has acted as a non-partisan board for the number of years that I've sat on it, and has always looked out for the best interests of all of Saraville, not just people's backyards. And I'll firmly stand on that. So, with that being said,
Well,
if,
I'd like to make a comment too on that.
Go ahead. Michael.
There's some serious issues facing the town. You know, what's going on with COLA, what's going to happen with National Lead. And I think the only way that we are going to move out smartly on this is that we all just kind of work together. The planning board, the council, Sarah, the Board of Education,
And the zoning board.
the zoning board, all of those entities work together because, you know, we're all in this together, and it's always been my policy that we're in this together is better than you're on your own.
And I think you're right, Michael. I mean, one of the comments here tonight was that they want to invite a bunch of people to redevelop in Hercules. I would like to see one person like Intel come in here and build a chip plant there. You know, I mean, something like that. But, I mean, how do you do that without the council being involved, the town being involved, the developer being involved? We did the first step to that tonight by asking for this redevelopment. You know, what comes out of that is going to have a lot to do with us and a lot of other people.
But there has to be some leadership to say that, you know, this area is in need of redevelopment, and let's get people from the town together, and let's go about this differently and say, what do you, get some suggestions out there, brainstorm, what do you want to see there as a town? I don't think, you know,
Up in Ithaca, New York, which is the least spot in the world where they would build a chip plant, they're building their third one. And they did it because they had a community that was representative and went and sold it to them. They got the community colleges, they got the Binghamton University, they got Buffalo University involved, and they can man those high-skilled jobs now. And what it's done for that whole area is amazing. And it happened 10 years ago when they built the first one. Now, these chip plants are multi-million-dollar facilities with clean rooms. There's no reason why we can't
we need to
do the
work,
same
we
thing
need
here.
to work together, and that's why we have a council representative on the planning board. And I mentioned this to Ms. Lembo in the past, and I'll mention it again, is that if council changes, if there's new members that are elected in here, they always wind up getting on the planning board. It seems like that goes to the newest council member. We have no continuity. And that's the problem. You know, if my recommendation, Pat, is that you stay on the planning board because you're familiar with the issues from this side, so that you can continue to communicate with your fellow council members about what the planning board's doing. But if you're gonna leave and a new council member gets it, doesn't know anything about, you know, what the planning board does, and for a year, and then somebody else comes in, there's no continuity there. And it doesn't make any sense.
Mike, I agree with you about the continuity, but, you know, who serves, it's not my decision.
Well, who decides? There's only 7 of you, somebody's deciding.
Well, listen, they had a professional
Majority
planner that
party
was on the
decides.
planning board, and they deemed him not professional.
Yeah, I know. That's the problem. We need to start working together and stop him and us against them kind of concept.
Right.
Because, you know, we'll live
You're
here.
absolutely right. The
We
only
all
way to
live here.
succeed is to work together.
You're absolutely right. Well, this is,
All right.
and it's not, the Sarah isn't. I need a motion, we open the public, we close the public, executive session, none?
None?
Take an adjournment?
Make a motion to adjourn, Mr.
Our
Chairman.
next meeting,
When is it?
August 2nd.
August
the
2nd.
2nd.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Proud to serve.
Thank you for the comments.
I was planning to say more, but I figured out that, you know, I'm more planned.
Again, there was nobody here from the public. 2 years from now, they'll be screaming and hollering, why'd you do this? Can I speak to you? Seriously, when you're talking to the redeveloper, I would like to see if we could get some kind of consortium together, because I worked on that one up in Ithaca where they built the chip plants.
Some type of manufacturing or something. Just did the Arizona plant in Woodbridge. Manufacturing jobs. Gotta do something for this next generation of kids. They're not all cut out to go to college.
Thank you, Jay. Good job, John.
Or a car dealer. Thank you, Mr. Manufacturing here.
You stopping?